It takes a lot to be weird in the state legislature. I've seen a lot of weird stuff. But this was really weird. This is Louisiana State Representative Roger Wilder III, and he's pushing a bill to remove legally mandatory lunch breaks for underage employees. And he's doing it in the creepiest way possible.
I think our young adults, because when I hear the word minor, I think of an 8 or a 9-year-old. When I hear 16 and 17-year-old, I think of a young adult. I believe that our young adults can make decisions without a babysitter.
I bet you weren't expecting him to come out the gate trying to redefine what underage means, but that is indeed one of the things he tries to use to justify this bill. It's also not the only time he does this.
And you mentioned the minor. You really believe a minor at 16 or 17 is a young adult?
I do. I do. We treat them as such in the state. The emancipation age is 16. You're allowed to marry at 16. You're allowed to drive at 16. Those are all adult actions.
What in the R. Kelly is going on down in Louisiana? I was looking forward to covering this bill and its hearing, but wow, I wasn't expecting Representative Wilder to come out with age ain't nothing but a number. I'll get back to the bill and the hearing in a bit, but let's do some background on our new friend. Representative Wilder owns 20 or so something Smoothie King locations in Louisiana and Mississippi. He also volunteers in the community, donating large sums of money to charity, being involved with DARE, and is also the head coach of a high school softball team. Here's him explaining in his own words why he ran for office.
I'm running for the position because 3 years ago things got really crazy in our state, and having 4 Smoothie Kings in Mississippi showed me a tale of two states. And it frustrated me that we had minimal restrictions in Mississippi, where I would come back over here and Livingston had a certain set of restrictions, and then you go into East Baton Rouge and it was really bad. So the Constitution and the Bible being thrown in the corner and stepped on constantly has really riled me up and wanted me to get involved. Second to that, though, would be my children. I've got a 19, a 20-year-old, and a 10-year-old. And I have a 19-year-old daughter. And if you were a grown man when she was 9 and wanted to walk in the restroom with her with makeup on, I would have probably ended you.
Basic Republican pablum and some transphobia. Actually, the transphobia was a big part of his campaign, and he's currently sponsoring a transphobic bathroom bill. When it passed the House, he posted this announcement on his Facebook page, which makes it look like he's running for town pervert or something. But beyond that, while running for office, our friend Representative Wilder admitted something very, very interesting.
But, owning a business is always tough, and we live in a state that doesn't exactly help in business. I have a minor team member that takes a 29-minute break and accidentally clocks in early, and they end up getting fined. I get fined for $1,500 for something so silly. And it's like, are you really trying to help me? I'm not running a sweatshop here.
Yes, that's right. He's actually been penalized under the law he's trying to repeal. Really puts an interesting spin on the whole thing, doesn't it? Anyway, back to the hearing. Remember when he made all those icky arguments about how 16 is mature enough to handle adult duties?
I think our young adults, because when I hear the word minor, I think of an 8 or a 9-year-old. When I hear 16 and 17-year-old, I think of a young adult. I believe that our young adults can make decisions without a babysitter.
And you mentioned the minor. You really believe a minor at 16 or 17 is a young adult?
I do. I do. We treat them as such in the state. The emancipation age is 16. You're allowed to marry at 16. You're allowed to drive at 16. Those are all adult actions.
Well, that wasn't the only odd argument he made during the hearing. In fact, almost all of them could be considered as kind of odd and weird. For example,
The law's got a hypocrisy to it. Right now, minors that are 16 or 17 or young adults, pick your synonym, go to school for 7 or 8 hours a day. I stopped at 12 state schools that have 25, 22-minute lunch breaks. The last thing I'd say is that I find it interesting that nobody really wants to challenge the high schools that have kids in a classroom for 8 hours, give them a 22-minute lunch break, and some of these kids go to football practice for 3.5 hours after. But in the school system, it's okay to not only violate the 5-hour law that I'm trying to repeal, but you also violate a second part of it after 9 hours. And I'd argue that a football practice is way more intensive than making a sandwich at Subway.
The argument, if you couldn't understand it from Mr. Wilder's presentation, is that if high schools don't give 30-minute lunches, why should he? And I understand his confusion. From what I understand of Louisiana charter school law, technically his frozen dessert empire counts as a charter school. So yes, he should operate under the same rules. You may think presenting this argument makes him look stupid. I'd ask which of his arguments in favor of this bill make him look smart. Speaking of looking stupid, Rep. Wilder tells a story about how he almost got in a fight with one of his managers because he was stupid. The context is that Mississippi doesn't require 30-minute breaks for underage employees, unlike Louisiana, and Wilder didn't know that.
I actually had a confrontation with my regional manager out there that almost ended bad until the other one raised their hand and said, Mr. Roger, I used to work in Louisiana. We don't have to do that in Mississippi, so all this extra paperwork's not necessary here. And I was like, oh, nice.
Sounds like he's fun to work for. Wilder almost hit or fired one of his regional managers because he didn't look up the law when he started doing business in a new state. Also, what kind of moron doesn't know that different states have different laws? Finally, why did he tell this story at a public hearing? I have so many questions. His ignorance of the law aside, Representative Wilder has a very black and white view of employer-employee relationships. It's his way or the highway.
My point is, there's a free market. If an individual's working in an establishment that treats them bad in any way, they can resign. So if a team member says, if an employer says, you're not going to get a break because the state doesn't make me, that team member can offer a resignation and leave whatever restaurant in that strip center or whatever GameStop or pick a business, retail restaurant, whatever. They go right next door to the now hiring sign and they apply.
By the way, that's in response to the question, is it your position that underage employees should just quit and leave if they don't get breaks under your new law?
Or if they do want to take a break without this law, then they can go to another job.
If the law requiring businesses to offer underage employees a lunch break is repealed, Rep. Wilder's answer to any employee who wants a break is to get lost. Get back to work or leave. And I don't think I need to explain this, but if he's willing to have a confrontation that almost ended badly with a regional manager over something he should have already known, how do you think he's going to react when an underage employee asks for a break and he doesn't want to give them one? You think he's going to give it to him? Or do you think it's going to, quote-unquote, end badly for the employee? Moving on, Wilder also makes the innovative case that since the bill that established the law that minors have to get 30-minute lunch breaks is 47 years old, it's obsolete.
The obsolete aspects are, number one, this law is 2024. It's 47 years old. Today, as opposed to 47 years ago, we have numerous federal laws that have evolved. We have collegiate courses in something called human resources that I think in the 70s and 60s probably didn't even exist. Franchises are everywhere, and they are absolute double, triple covering with their processes and policies. Today we have cell phones. There's a camera on every phone. One example is McDonald's currently sends out team member surveys to their minor team members to check and see how things are going. So there's a number of things that are happening in the last 47 years that have made this law obsolete.
Okay, 1. The Society of Human Resources was established in 1948, so I think we can safely assume that the study of human resources is a little bit older than that. 2. McDonald's has an app to check to see how their underage employees are doing. Yeah, Roger, I can't imagine why they are doing that in Louisiana. It's a mystery. 3. The original law was enacted in 1976, but it's been revised since then, most recently in 2011. Which, under your explanation, counts as a young adult, but for everyone else, it's still pretty recent. Finally, in your explanation as to why you ran, you cited the Constitution and the Bible being treated badly.
So the Constitution and the Bible being thrown in the corner and stepped on constantly has really riled me up and wanted me to get involved.
I'm not an expert, but I'm pretty sure both of those are older than 47 years. Should they be thrown out? Is that what you're saying, Roger? That anything older than 47 years should be thrown out? Because I can think of one more thing that's 47 years old that should definitely be thrown out. Roger, how old are you? I know you were 36 on November 28, 2012 because of a headline. That makes you at a minimum 47 years old today. So, Roger, if you were making the case that something is obsolete and old because it's 47 years old, why shouldn't you resign from the state legislature right now? Ugh. The last argument I'm going to touch on that he makes is that this bill is an economic development bill.
So this bill is about maximizing employment and providing employers with the workforce that they need.
He says that because restaurants have to give minors 30-minute breaks, they don't hire them.
I had a DECA teacher come to me and say, we're having problems getting teenagers hired, and I asked why, and it had to do with this issue exactly, and then I polled some local restaurateurs, and apparently there were whole chains in our area in northwest Louisiana that wouldn't hire any minors at all because of this rule. Do you feel that is predominant throughout the state?
I feel that's a fact because when I was 16 years old, I applied at a business in Metairie, And my friend ran it, and he said, oh, sorry, we don't hire before you're 18. And he cited this exact thing in 1992.
Now that's stupid, but it's also ignorant and misleading, because he's leaving out one really important fact. On screen right now is from the Louisiana Revised Statutes. It forbids minors from serving or selling alcoholic beverages at a restaurant. So break or no break, no restaurant that depends on liquor sales is ever going to hire a minor, because why would you hire someone who can't sell one of your most valuable products? That cuts out a lot of your Applebee's, Chili's, and whatever other sit-down restaurant you can think of. I'd blast Representative Wilder for leaving this out, but he probably didn't know. I mean, he's really ignorant when it comes to the rest of the law. Why wouldn't he not know this? So what do we have here at the end? We have the creepiest person on earth.
I think our young adults, because when I hear the word minor, I think of an 8 or a 9-year-old. When I hear 16 and 17-year-old, I think of a young adult. I believe that our young adults can make decisions without a babysitter.
And you mentioned the minor. You really believe a minor at 16 or 17 is a young adult?
I do. I do. We treat them as such in the state. The emancipation age is 16. You're allowed to marry at 16. You're allowed to drive at 16. Those are all adult actions.
With a fundamental and aggressive lack of knowledge about the law trying to eliminate protections for underage employees. And while you might mourn that a labor protection for minors is being thrown by the wayside, I'd also like to remind you that this guy has 350 employees who have to live with his short-tempered ignorance every day. Which is probably a lot worse. But just so you don't think I'm being too mean to poor old Roger, I'm going to give Representative Roger Wilder III a piece of advice. And it's helpful advice, too. During Representative Wilder's testimony, he mentioned a few times something along the lines of employees taking less than 30 minutes for lunch. In this specific case, he's mentioning a hypothetical underage employee taking a 10-minute break.
Most of the team members we hire have initiative. Otherwise, they don't show up to want to work. When they show up to want to work, they it's a 5-hour, 6-hour shift after school or on a weekend, and they say, you know what, I want my wage. I'd like to go sit down for 10 minutes, if I want to, and grab a bite to eat. But I'd like to clock back on and start working when I'm done instead of sitting there idle for 20 more minutes or whatnot.
Now, I'm not a labor attorney or super familiar with labor regulations, but I don't think there's a lunch break that lasts 20 minutes or less. Certainly not 10. According to the Department of Labor website, 5 to 20-minute breaks should be counted as part of time worked. Again, I'm not an expert, but if it is part of your standard labor practice to make people clock out for 10-minute breaks, you may want to talk to your attorney about this particular labor practice. I'm History Sock, and I'll see you at the next committee meeting.